Cue suspenseful music. Dun, 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 dun. What do we have here? This is the Voigtländer 27mm f2 Ultron, a lens I've been pining over for quite some time. Must be about 3 years now. A lens I've had in my window shopping basket for at least 3 times by now, without actually going ahead and buying ever, which proved to be a good thing, but I didn't know it back then. A lens which is at the same time great and not. A lens I'm very happy to have been able to try out, and a lens I'm very happy I didn't actually go ahead and buy for myself. Let me explain. Sup boys, welcome to 1000 Words, and you, the 3 girls that watch these videos of mine. I'm Radu, a street photographer from Romania, and this is the review of the Voigtländer 27mm f2, a lens specifically and exclusively designed for the Fujifilm X mount system. I'm going ahead and pulling up the specifications of this lens because I can't be asked to remember all of these, and some of these are interesting. Now, this lens is not available on any other mount, so if you want to use this, the Ultron, you're going to have to use a Fujifilm camera. It's now, I should perhaps preface all of this by saying, while some of you may know this already, I've touched upon this subject in other videos, it's worth mentioning because it's relevant. It's going to be relevant very soon. I'm building 2 separate kits of lenses which serve 2 separate purposes. Now, these can and sometimes do intertwine. Lenses in one kit can sometimes be used for the purpose of the other. I have a kit that is made up entirely out of Fujichrons. I love my Fujichrons. I have the 16, the 23, the 35, and the 50. And those lenses are meant to be reliable, fast, precise, and silent, no matter how good you are. And I've had more practice than most people out there in shooting manual focus. I mean, I've shot vintage manual glass on the street for 7-8 years now, and while I have had, admittedly, and I'm saying this as a matter of fact, it's not meant to sound like I'm bragging, but while I've had most practice than most people, you're never going to be as precise as autofocusing. So with that in mind, I've decided I'm going to keep a kit of lenses which are, let's go ahead and call them for my serious work. Lenses for bad weather, lenses that are meant to be reliable, predictable, and these are my Fujichrons. Then seeing how there's a part of me that decidedly still is after a bit of fun and still likes to get some blur, some good bokeh, and some quirkiness in his images, I've also decided to start building a manual focus lens kit, which currently consists of 7 Artisan's lenses. I have the 10mm f3.5, the 35mm f1.4, with the Brighton Star 35mm f0.95 currently on the way. It's supposed to get here in a few days, taking its sweet ass time by now. I think it's 3 weeks since I ordered it, but this is besides the point. This latter kit is for vibe shooting, for feeling like a hipster, for manual focus, which I still do enjoy from time to time, for those images which have some classic characteristics as far as rendering goes, for a bit of fun basically, for character, for soul, for personality, for quirkiness, for that certain je ne sais quoi, which I happen to say quoi, the fact that they're less than modern. Now, the Fujichrons, for all their qualities, and they sure do have a lot of them, they make good images, they're fast, they're well built, extremely well built, they're reliable, they're internally focusing. They're light, they're pretty, they're weather sealed. For all their qualities, they are lacking in one regard, and that is the aspect of soul and character. They're slightly modern, not harsh, not digital, not clinical, certainly not if you shoot them wide open, but still decidedly on the more modern side of things. And my kit of manual lenses is meant to balance that. This, the Voigtländer Ultron 27f2, was meant to be a candidate for that latter kit of lenses. I've wanted it for a very long time for a couple of reasons, and chief among them being the fact that it's damn sexy. Sure enough, I always like the black ones better, but this is on loan, so this brings me to saying thanks to Tudor Mateescu. He's a fellow YouTuber, and I'm very grateful to him. Thank you, Tudor, for allowing me to borrow this and use for a couple of months and test it out. One of the main reasons I wanted this lens as a candidate for that vibe shooting manual focus kit of lenses is, on the one hand, because it's a manual focus lens, then it's a Voigtländer lens, which has good reputation. I loved the Nocton 40mm f1.4, the full frame lens, which, much like this one, is a bit too good for its own sake. Build quality is incredible. The way it looks is also very pretty. Handling is great. So all of these are things which made me want to have this. Now, it's a bit on the pricey side of things. 550 European rubles brand new, and 400 to 450 on MPB, about 400 on local used markets in Romania. So for that kind of money, I sure do expect autofocus. I do expect, if not that, at least weather sealing. Worth mentioning the fact that this lens has electronic contacts here. This is neither here nor there. I don't care much for this. Sure, it's a nice to have, but definitely not essential. It will transmit EXIF data. You will be able to see the f-stop. It does relay real-time information to your camera, allowing you to see your depth of field, your distance scale, and all that, which is certainly nice, but nothing essential, nothing I can't live without. And especially seeing how I'm somebody that has used vintage lenses on dumb adapters for years, I've never once felt like this was something I was missing out on. Again, nice to have, not essential. What is essential, and especially for this kind of dough, if we're talking about 500, give or take, is at least weather sealing, if not both weather sealing and autofocus. So my manual lenses cost peanuts. I mean, while I did get the 10mm for free for a review, it's a lens that can be had for $100. Then there's the 35mm f1.4, which I love to no end. That cost me something like 75 to 80 European rubles. I mean, that's stupid. That's stupid. It's very easy to go out with the missus one evening and spend more than that on burgers and beers. So, pricey, a bit expensive. That's why I always hesitated, and that's why I'm very happy I was given the opportunity to test this lens for free. Thank you again, Tudor. Let's talk a bit about build quality and construction. Now, this lens is yay thin, basically like a pack of cards, not much thicker than that, extremely compact, very well built, entirely made out of metal and glass. I think there's some plastic in the innards, but the outer barrel is decidedly metal. Well machined aluminium is what I think it is. Cosina made, but then again, Cosina makes all the Voigtländers. Worth mentioning, but neither here nor there. There's a generously thick aperture rig on the front side of the lens with very firm, very good feeling detents, stops at every third of a stop. It feels nice and firm. There's no way you're going to, there is always a way, but this doesn't often get bumped out of place. The focusing ring is really very smooth. It has a focusing tab, which allows you to very easily manual focus this lens. As far as the travel, this has got a really short travel. I think it's something like 100 degrees, bit more than a quarter of a full turn, which is great for a lens of this focal length. It allows for confident, precise manual focusing. Some people have been complaining about the fact that there's basically 2 millimeters of travel between 3 meters and infinity. Some people are claiming this allows for improper, imprecise autofocusing at anything over 3 meters, but I haven't found this to be the case. I've shot this on the street a lot, and I've not had any issues with manual focus. Admittedly, I have had more practice in manual focusing than most people out there, but I don't think this is any sort of issue at all. Very well dampened, very smooth. The focusing ring is just great. The lens has a very thin but very nicely textured ring at the base, allowing for good grip in mounting and unmounting this lens from the camera. It comes with a pinch action plastic hood like this, very classic. And what's very unclassic is the neat little tiny hood. This is the the hood. It's like 2 millimeters. And this is what I think is like something like 20 millimeter thread screw-on cap for the hood. Now, I love this hood because it adds nothing as far as volume and length to the lens. It's really difficult to get this to focus because it's trying to get my face. Look, it's nothing added as far as weight, as far as volume and length, but still does good to protect the front lens element. How well this behaves for its intended purpose, we'll very shortly talk about this, but I think it's unnecessary for that because the coatings do a great job. Hold that thought, we'll talk about this for sure. Let's talk about specs a little, and let me pull out the manufacturer's specifications. 27 millimeter. So basically, in full frame terms, it's about 40 something millimeters, 40.5, I think, to be precise. Wide open f2, all the way closed down to f22 with third of a stop increments. I always prefer full stop increments. There's the front wheel if you want to get any more precise than that, but yeah, it is what it is. 10 perfectly straight aperture blades, a minimum focusing distance of 25 centimeters, which is actually surprisingly capable in getting very close to your subject. It achieves a magnification of 1 to 6.7, which is nothing to brag about, but it's worth mentioning. A filter thread of 43 millimeters, 23.5 millimeters long, 59.3 maximum diameter, weighing in at 120 grams, which is basically nothing. Should be worth mentioning, there's an optical construction of 6 elements in 4 groups with an atypical partial dispersion element, the second one from the front, which is supposed to improve light transmission and protect from flares, aberrations, which are basically non-existent. Now, as far as build quality, ergonomics, and the such, this lens is extremely well built, of very high quality. Reminds me of the 40mm f1.4 Nocton. It has the same great feeling. It feels like a jewel. It's so light yet surprisingly dense. It really does feel like a very well designed piece of mechanical and optical engineering. Very tight tolerances are at their minimum. There's nothing shaking inside. There's nothing loose. Everything is great, extremely well built. Balance is great on the camera. Actually, let's give it a go. Looks the part. The mount, I think, is a bit too harsh for my liking. There's some slight scratchiness to it when you mount it on the camera, but it looks gorgeous. Very, very nice. The one thing I do have to criticize, and that's basically not a fault of this lens, it's to do with any lens that has the focusing tab. It's the fact that if you want to shoot in portrait orientation and the focus happens to be situated at infinity focus, there's some very cumbersome hand gymnastics you have to do in order to find the focusing tab like this. Or yeah, but that's basically nitpicking by now. Yeah, what else is there to say? Not much. So this basically brings us to the subject of image quality, the most important thing, because after all, this is a lens, an optical device meant to make images. Now, I have alluded by now once or twice at my main complaint towards this lens, and it's the fact that it's too good. Together with the price, which is a bit too hefty for my liking. The main reason this won't be included in my manual focus lens kit is basically because it's a bit too modern. Sure, it does have a soft touch, very sharp in the middle, with corners that are predictably somewhat softer, still a bit too modern. I think I've constantly shot this at f2. There's basically no reason, as far as I'm concerned, I never found a reason to close it down. Perhaps once or twice I did maybe shoot it at f4, maybe f5.6 when I was looking for a greater depth of field, but for most intents and purposes, f2 was always enough. 27mm is rather wide, and even if you equate for a full frame field of view, 40mm is still not very long, so f2 was basically always good enough. At f2, this lens has got an impressive, quite a remarkable ability to capture details, to render resolution, and it broke absolutely no sweat in resolving the 26 megapixel sensor of my X-T3. Just take a look at this image, zoomed in to 100%. The amount of detail is frankly incredible. Sure, corners do get predictably somewhat soft, so do the edges, but it's basically the way I use this is as a creative tool. It allows me to better isolate my subject. I hardly ever have my subject so far into the corners or edges of this image that shooting it at wide open would render my images unusable. Colors are unsurprisingly very pretty, vibrant, lively, playful, and joyful. Sure, they do benefit for a touch of extra saturation added in post-production, but shoot this in JPEG mode on any camera and you're bound to have images that are pretty and beautiful. Images have a somewhat classical look. The way this renders colors is soft-handed. It's gentle and elegant. Colors are punchy and vibrant while not being over the top. Frankly, very pretty. It's very well corrected as far as white balance. This was basically always on auto white balance, and sometimes I do have to correct this. Sometimes it does seem to prefer a colder touch, but usually auto white balance works great, and it's never too far from neutral. Monochrome is where this lens shines, and you will excuse this intentional pun. I think it does a great job. It renders the entire spectrum very nicely, naturally, and precisely. The transition between the darkest, deepest, inkiest blacks into the shadows, into the midtones, into the highlights is well controlled. All throughout the tonal range, tones are well represented. The transition is smooth. There's basically nothing to fault this lens for as far as black and white. It's sufficiently contrasty, making images that have good body, presence, and highlights are bright and shiny with a nice, almost metallic sheen to them. Shadows are deep and inky. Black and whites come out great. Now, we have to talk about the hefty vignette this lens makes shot wide open. And yeah, it's neither here nor there as far as I'm concerned. On the one hand, it's easily fixable in post-production. It's a trivial matter, frankly. And on the other hand, together with the fact that corners tend to be somewhat soft, I use vignetting oftentimes as a creative tool aiding in my composition. Now, as far as creativity goes, I often like using flares in my shots. And this lens is very unwilling and stubbornly incapable of making any flares that are worth anything. Shot directly into the sun, or frankly into any other strong, harsh source of light, this lens basically never wants to flare. Contrast loss is minimal, and this is great on the one hand. It's quite remarkable, the quality of the coatings, and I've tested this with and without the hood, which basically does zero difference. So it's entirely on the quality of the coatings. This lens's ability to stay out of trouble when struck dead on by harsh light is frankly impressive and quite remarkable. On the other hand, what is less impressive and remarkable is its inability, its stubborn unwillingness to make any sort of flares. Look at this series of images. I've tried various angles, I've tried, and I've only been able to get this tiny speck of, what is it? There's just very, very little ghosting. It's a tiny blob of color, which basically only serves to blue ball the photographer if he's after flares. There's no veiling, which is good, but there's also no flares. Don't get this lens if you're after wild flares, because there's none to be had. There is some very slight geometric distortion. It's impressive how well corrected this is geometrically. Also, aberrations are nowhere to be seen. Very good quality coatings, very good optical construction, just some very slight geometric distortions, some softness in the corners. It really gets very good once you stop it down to f4 or f5.6. Not that I did much of that, but that's what I've heard. Basically zero aberrations, no flares, no ghosting, no loss of contrast to speak of when shot directly into the light. Really very good. Frankly, too good. Oh yeah, there's one thing. It's about this lens's impressive ability to render good background blur and make quite some nice bokeh. Now, seeing how this is 27mm, realistically, one wouldn't expect much of anything in terms of bokeh and background blur. F2 is nothing special as far as maximum openings, so one realistically wouldn't expect a lot of blur. However, this lens surprises. It can really separate the subject from the background. If you mind your distances, distance from the subject and from the subject to the background, it can really make the subject pop. There's very good 3D pop. There's quite a nice, obvious depth to the images. So basically great for portraits. The bokeh balls have some edges, and this only serves to make blur that's somewhat characterful. There is a bit of personality to it. As far as I'm concerned, I'm not one to like that kind of bokeh that is really very soft, that amorphous mass of nothingness that doesn't allow you to see anything in the background. I do love me some good background blur, but I want a bit of character, and this has a bit. Frankly, too little, if you ask me. There are some slight distinct edges to the bokeh balls in the background. There is a bit of action there, nothing that's anywhere near agitated or nervous. There's just a slight hint of character there, enough to be worth mentioning, not enough to merit this lens a place in my character lens kit. And this is basically the gist of things. this lens is too tame. It's too well behaved. While on the one hand, there are good things about this. For instance, the 35 f1.4 from 7 Artisans basically makes images that are trash worthy in some instances when light hits it at an off angle. This does not. This stays out of trouble real well, maintaining good contrast, frankly excellent. However, it's too well corrected for my taste. It's too damn good for its own sake. Too tame, too well behaved, too predictable. It's too good. I am thankful and grateful to Tudor for allowing me to try out this lens. I am going to pack it up and return it to him, perhaps even today. I'm happy I didn't go ahead and spend the 500 for 50 that this lens costs, because it's in no man's land as far as I'm concerned. For this amount of money, I want something that's reliable and has autofocus and weather sealing. And if I'm after a character lens, I definitely want a lot more character than this lens provides. So with that in mind, thank you all for watching. This has been 1000 Words. I have been Radu. Until next time, I bid you farewell.